You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. We have a lot to cover, a lot of great information to share with you, so let's get started. The National Flood Insurance Program is set to expire in just a couple of weeks. Senators Cassidy and Kennedy are co-sponsoring a bill to push the September 30th deadline to next year. Louisiana Insurance Commissioner Jim Donnellan admits hundreds of thousands of homeowners could not live in parts of the state without it. Their bill has bipartisan support from coastal congressmen like Bob Menendez of New Jersey, but it's the landlocked congressmen that need convincing.
There's those who frankly want to kill the program, as if the private market is going to step in and provide that which NFIB does. That's not going to happen.
And Senator Kennedy says he is working to fast-track this bill by skipping committee, and he's already spoken to the White House about signing the bill. Gasoline prices continue to rise as the state rebounds from Hurricane Ida, but the reason for the increase at the pump goes beyond the storm. It's actually pretty complex. The Gulf of Mexico makes up a large portion of America's oil and gas activities. The Louisiana Oil and Gas Association spokesperson tells us many of the offshore platforms were not damaged by Ida, but the industry is still reeling from the pandemic.
The Gulf of Mexico makes up a large portion of America's oil and gas activities, and the longer that the Louisiana coast takes to recover from Hurricane Ida, the more that gas prices will rise and rise and rise.
All right, 3 weeks after Ida, a number of refineries in the state are still without power. Lorenz says as of now, there's no time frame on when they'll recover and drive those gas prices down at the pump. Neighborhoods in New Orleans are dealing with the stench of weeks' worth of garbage going uncollected. Many are frustrated with the city's response. With a lack of sanitation workers and hurricane recovery going on, many streets are lined with trash. Mayor LaToya Cantrell opened a drop-off site for people to bring bags, but those who don't have transportation are left waiting.
I don't like it. I mean, we paying for trash pickup, and we doing it ourselves. It's disgusting. And I'm a senior citizen. I can't be picking up on these heavy bags and things.
Now, the city launched Operation Mardi Gras on Friday, bringing in heavy machinery to help pick up the piles of garbage. There are plans for crews to continue daily pickup until the issue is resolved. Now, the Louisiana Attorney General announced he's going to sue the president. This comes after Biden mandated companies with more than 100 employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Jeff Landry, the AG, and 24 other attorneys general sent a letter to the president writing in part, quote, "Your vaccine mandate represents not only a threat to individual liberty, but a public health disaster that will displace vulnerable workers and exacerbate a nationwide hospital staffing crisis with severe consequences for all Americans," end quote. A little more friendly interaction from Louisiana when LSU President William Tate traveled to Washington to meet with President Biden. He's sharing how the flagship school is handling COVID-19 protocols and vaccine mandates. Political reporter Shannon Hecht has the details.
President Tate touted that 81% of the on-campus student body is vaccinated. The COVID task force wanted to learn how the different requirements by the university help with the vaccination rate.
Vaccination rate at Louisiana State University went from 63 to 81% of the students vaccinated in weeks. And it's about beating this virus, and it's about saving lives.
LSU was one of the first universities to require proof of vaccination or a negative test to enter the football stadium, which President Biden wanted to know more about.
I think that's the positive part that he wanted to highlight and wanted to better understand how that might work at other institutions of higher education that don't have similar requirements
He also shared how the university is tracking COVID outbreaks in on-campus housing through wastewater testing. This has been a way for vaccinated and unvaccinated people to know if they need to be tested. Last week was the first Tiger home game, and there have been reports of relaxed gates not checking for proof of vaccination. President Tate says there are talks on how to best fix that.
There will always be situations where individuals are able to avoid the mandate. It's just axiomatic. But I do believe that there are a few things we can do to tighten that up, one of which is probably a stronger pre-registration process.
He was joined by representatives from Disney, Microsoft, a children's hospital, and more to discuss their different mandates and vaccination rates.
Now, students who missed the deadline to opt out of the vaccine requirement or show vaccination status were told they would be unenrolled from LSU. At the latest count, that number was at 78 students. Coming up, Louisiana's senators sit down with Shannon Hecht to talk about federal help for Louisiana in the wake of Hurricane Ida. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Louisiana will need billions in federal aid to recover from Hurricane Ida, not only to fix some of that infrastructure, but to improve it for future disasters as well. That's going to require lawmakers on Capitol Hill to get on the same page and come up with a plan. Political reporter Shannon Hecht talks with Senator Bill Cassidy as he tours the damage.
Senator Bill Cassidy, you are joining us now as you are continuing to tour some of the Hurricane Ida recovery efforts. So what have you kind of seen over this last week in your tour of the state?
So actually, I just left an infrastructure meeting in Livingston Parish. Livingston Parish is growing dramatically, but they showed that they've not built a new road in 100 years. Why is that important? Because that is a major evacuation route if we're going to have a storm that hits the Florida parishes, or one that's sitting in Baton Rouge and people want to go eastward. And so we discussed how the Infrastructure Jobs Act bill will 6-lane the I-12 going all the way from the Amite River to the Pearl River. And we also spoke, is there a way that we can get Highway 190 expanded to 2 lanes, either direction, all the way to the Tangipahoa line? So we're thinking about how do we prepare for future storms? And of course, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act bill is one way to do so.
Right, and you're a bipartisan infrastructure bill. What are some specific things that can help us here in Louisiana when it comes to the energy grid or the flooding around the non-federally backed levee system?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. $3.5 billion to harden the grid in areas that have been hit by natural disasters. There's an additional $3.5 billion to have a diversity of grid sources. So for example, a more distributed system so that those folks who have solar panels, for example, even if the light pole goes down, they still have electricity. And then more money as to how to integrate the two, because you want to make sure that everything works together. Regarding flooding, FEMA gets $3.5 billion to help with those areas which have flooded in recent history. Hey, that's us, right? There's also $500 million to help provide low-interest loans for better stormwater drainage.
So focusing on the recovery relief, I know the delegation has been pushing for a supplemental relief aid package. I know that was a big challenge for the Lake Charles area. They still are waiting on that. So what are kind of the talks around that right now?
It helps us tremendously. I hate to say it, that fellow Americans were affected. But the northeastern states being hit so hard by Ida creates more states to advocate for relief. Now, we will get the money for Southwest Louisiana in the near future, and it actually will end up being more. Under President Trump's administration, it was going to be roughly $500 million, but now we've been able to increase that, we think, close to $900 million or even more. So that's a good thing. But as regards the current storm, President Biden has proposed $10 billion to address the needs in Louisiana as well as in the Northeast, and with a potential second bill after that as more needs become apparent.
Right, and we're over 2 weeks since the storm hit, and so what are kind of some of the things where you've seen that the relief aid that's already come through has gone right, and also maybe things that we need to improve on for future storms?
Well, so clearly the grid took a huge hit, and we'd like to harden the grid, both in the disaster supplemental, but also in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, as we mentioned, $3.5 billion to harden the grid. We can't have our electricity go out so frequently. Major businesses will not locate here unless they know we have a secure, safe, it's going to be their electrical grid. But the restoration of that, there's been major efforts, and very pleased with that. What needs to improve is housing. How do we keep our fellow Louisianians from being displaced from a storm like this and with no place to go back to for months? We have to have affordable housing that is built to hurricane code, that is in the places where people live and work. And that's our big challenge. And we're working with the governor's office and with the administration to try and find solutions for that.
All right, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch as we continue to follow this bill.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate it.
Now, Shannon also sat down with Senator John Kennedy, who has differing ideas of how federal recovery aid should be spent.
Senator Kennedy, you're here back in Louisiana after a couple of weeks since Hurricane Ida hit, and you've been touring around some of the damage. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've had so far?
It was worse than Katrina. Certainly, Ida and Nicholas together were worse than Katrina, except for New Orleans, where the levees held, thank the Lord. Much worse than Katrina. I've seen it from the ground. I've seen it from the air. FEMA's doing a fairly decent job, certainly much better than after Katrina right now, helping us. I've checked the Monday after Ida. FEMA has about $40 billion in their checking account. But we're going to need help with medium and long-term housing. We have a lot of people who lost their home. They didn't have insurance. They had insurance, but they can't afford the deductible, or they were underinsured. I've introduced a bill to provide about $10 billion for southwest Louisiana, southeast Louisiana. It would also help our neighbors in northeast America, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. They got hit by Ida as well. The president says he'll support it, and as long as the president does not insist on coupling it with a controversial bill, if he'll just agree with me to do a clean standalone bill, we'll get it passed.
So you brought up housing, and obviously that's a big issue for folks who still are not back in their homes. They may never get back in their homes. So what are some ways that you are working to get more affordable housing across our state right now?
Well, I don't want to give government more money to build housing. Okay, most of my people have houses. They were damaged. They need to get back in their original houses. And what I'm working on is money to people, not to local government, not to state government, not to NGOs, to people, because they didn't have insurance, or they were underinsured, or they can't afford the deductible. You can't buy homeowners insurance in Louisiana without a 2% name store deductible. My deductible, for example, is $14,000. Most people don't have, I don't have $14,000 laying around, but I can put it together. But the average person out there has lost everything, can't put together $8,000 or $10,000. It might as well be $140,000. So I want to help them. That's my first priority. My second priority is to, aside from getting flood insurance extended and trying to hold the rates down, is to ask ourselves, you know, what can we do? You mentioned strengthening the grid. Now, there's been a lot of loose talk about, well, we'll just bury all the lines. Sure, that's a wonderful idea, but it will cost about 10 times more than what it would cost to have the lines above ground. And there is no money fairy.
Right, and you know, especially in our southern parishes, we saw thousands of poles snapped in half, and that's part of why it's taken us this long to get power back. So if burying the lines is not quite the option that we can go for financially, is there another way that you know of, or maybe would be in favor of to harden this grid for us?
Well, some people say that the answer is the infrastructure bill in front of Congress now. I don't agree with that. I mean, the infrastructure bill, it's not real infrastructure. It's about 23% real infrastructure, and the rest of it is Green New Deal and welfare. And that's why I didn't vote for it. I can't see how borrowing money to spend $7.5 billion to build electric vehicle charging stations is going to help Louisiana. I couldn't vote to borrow another $7.5 billion to buy us electric buses. We don't need electric buses right now.
There's the $3.5 trillion bill that's led by the Democrats, right? And that's the one that you're referencing here.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of the bipartisan bill that's about $1.5 trillion?
No, first of all, the two bills are together. The proponents of the fake infrastructure bill are trying to say it's separate from the Green New Deal bill, which is coming next. But they're all linked together.
So if they were separate, would you be in support of it?
No. I just explained to you. It's a sucker play. They told us, well, they came to us and they said, look, here's the deal. It's real infrastructure. It won't raise taxes. And we won't have to borrow any money. It's not real infrastructure. It's 23% real infrastructure. The rest is a Green New Deal, welfare, slush fund for the Biden administration. And of all the things that we're talking about, they're all important. The extension of the tax deadlines, the flood insurance extension, holding the rates down. But the most important thing I'm working on is getting money as a result of these storms directly to people. Because at some point FEMA's going to leave and we're going to be past the crisis stage. And my people have to have a place to live. And I don't, this idea, well, we need to give government more money for affordable housing. No, what we need to do is help people get back in their homes. And FEMA doesn't do that. It's not in their job description. We got to pass a bill. And I can't promise people, because I've got to get 60 votes in the Senate, but I can promise you this. I'm going to chase my colleagues like a hound from hell until I get their yes vote.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Now, we've told you about the bipartisan infrastructure plan Senator Cassidy has worked on, but President Joe Biden has another one on his own. Details when we come back.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. In Washington, President Joe Biden is working to garner support for Democrats' $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. But moderates are still on the fence. Jesse Tenor reports.
We can build an economy that gives working people a fair shot this time.
President Biden continues to pitch his $3.5 trillion human infrastructure plan, not only to American families, but also the Democrats who are still on the fence.
My plan benefits ordinary Americans, not those at the top who don't need the help.
The president's proposal would provide free preschool and community college and make daycare, child care, and elder care more affordable. It would also lower prescription drug costs by giving Medicare the power to negotiate prices.
We can invest in our people, giving our families a little help with their toughest expenses.
But other than the plan's price tag,
this is insanity. It is fiscally irresponsible.
Prescription drug pricing has become the latest divide among progressive and moderate Democrats. Oregon Congressman Kurt Schrader was one of 3 Democrats to vote against the current provision in committee and criticized the overall process.
In 1 month, we're put together a $3.5 trillion bill that has no chance of passing the Senate.
President Biden also still has to unite his party over how he plans to fund the majority of his economic agenda, raising taxes on wealthy Americans and large corporations.
It's about time working people got the tax breaks in this country.
And the House has also committed to voting on the Senate-passed traditional infrastructure bill by September 27th. But with all these other negotiations happening, that self-imposed deadline could slide. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
Congressman Troy Carter is the only Louisiana congressman to support the Democrats' bill, and Senator Bill Cassidy is pushing to unlink his bipartisan infrastructure bill that we mentioned earlier from that package. Lawmakers head back to Capitol Hill this week to continue that debate. Up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.